So in today's lecture, we are going to look at the stability aspect of delta sigma modulators. Okay. Now, how about a first order delta sigma? So let me call it as mod 1. Right. So in the previous classes, we have dealt quite extensively with delta sigma modulators. We have looked at what is called as the signal transfer function, the noise transfer function, what is noise shaping, how do we get higher resolution, right? And what happens in higher order delta sigma modulators? How do we calculate the SNTR and therefore the effective number of bits, and all those things we have discussed. And I mentioned in last class that stability is one of the main factors which prevents us from going to prevents us from increasing the order of the loop. Okay. And in last class, if you remember, we also computed the total in-band noise, the total noise, and we also looked at what is called as the variance of the noise, right? And we looked at the variance of the noise at the input of the comparator, and we saw that as the uh, order increases, right, the in-band noise drops down, and the out-of-band noise, or rather the total variance of the noise, increases. Okay, and this noise increases at the input of the quantizer also. That is what we discussed and concluded at the end of the previous class. Now, I want to kind of take a quick look at stability for the first order delta sigma. Now, our noise transfer function is given by 1 minus Z inverse, right? And as we saw, right, like you can kind of write it as 1 by Z minus 1 by Z. The pole is at 0, and you have a 0 at the unity circle. And if you look at the linearized analysis, okay, we say that this is unconditionally stable. Now notice the phrase linearized analysis. Why do we say it is linearized analysis? So I'm kind of going to draw what is another popular version. I looked at it in the last class also. We put the Z inverse here, right? And this is our quantizer, right? So basically this is where the error gets added, right? And this is our, let's call it as your U, and let's be a little more consistent. Let's say this is Y and this is V, right? U is the input, V is the output, Y is the input of the quantizer, right? And what we saw is when we derived the Z we wrote the expressions in the Z transform. Now all this is done, like the noise transfer function is equal to 1 minus Z inverse and all that stuff. So all this is assuming that it is a linear time invariant system, right? Whatever you would have studied as Laplace transforms, Z transforms, and so on, all of them are valid only for linear systems and time invariant systems, correct? LTI systems. So, but strictly speaking, if you see, this is not an LTI system, okay? Because the quantizer is a highly nonlinear system. The quantizer is a nonlinear block, right? Now, because we have a to D and a D to A to put together, we kind of linearize it and say that there is an additive noise whose PSD is white and whose PDF is uniformly distributed. So that is what we have assumed, right? We have linearized this nonlinear system, and we have kind of come to this conclusion, and we have written these noise transfer function, right? And to a large extent it is true, right? As long as the signal is going to be kind of in this region, right, the A to D plus D to A conversion with an additive error is fairly okay. I mean, it's not a very bad assumption, it's not a very bad approximation, right? It is fine. So that is why we go through this linearized analysis, and we say that this particular first order loop is unconditionally stable. Now what about the actual scenario? Okay, What happens if your input, let's say, is greater than 1? Let's say all this is, the let's say the quantizer is bounded between -1 and 1. I mean, you can take the example of a single, excuse me, you can probably take the example of a single bit quantizer, right? And you can say, okay, what happens when you have a when input whose magnitude is greater than the range of your quantizer? Right? What happens if the magnitude of your thing is greater than your quantizer? What will you do? Will your modulator be able to reproduce the output? Can you tell me? Like, let's say the quantizer's range is, let's say, from, -1. Okay, what? Let's say the quantizer is from -1 to 1, for example. Okay. So let's say the A to D and the D to A together, their relationship is given by this. All right. Now, if your input, if the magnitude of U is greater than 1, what will this modulator do?
Its output always one.
Correct, right? Lately, I mean, you will basically have an error which is always 1, and you keep integrating, right? And it'll somehow try to, basically it'll give a feedback signal of +1 every time, right? And so it kind of, goes into, I mean, it is basically not going to work, right? The whole thing falls apart, correct? And that is what we see, right? So if your first order modulator is going to be overloaded, basically you are going to get a very wrong output, correct? So you can kind of say that as long as U is less than 1, then the loop is basically stable, right? And what will basically happen is, although this will be 1, right, what will happen to Y? What do you think will happen to Y?
Y increases exponentially.
Basically,
Y will increase, yeah.
Y will keep increasing. I mean, not necessarily exponentially, but basically Y will keep increasing, right? Because this is an integrator, right? Let's say, for example, U is equal to 1.3 or something, right? Let's say this is 1.3, and you keep feedbacking, I mean, feeding back 1, right? You keep accumulating 0.3. So what will happen? It will keep accumulating, 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 and this Y will keep growing, right? Physically, what will happen is it will, I mean, when you actually implement these things with, transistors and so on, it will go and sit at VDD. That is true. But at a more system level, what will happen? Y will keep growing till the whole thing becomes dysfunctional. Okay. This is the problem with first order modulator. I mean, this is understood if your input range is, I mean, if your input is beyond the range of your A to D converter and your D to A converter, you are basically going to have this kind of a behavior. Okay. But otherwise, for bounded inputs, right? So for modulus of U less than 1, it is always stable. All right. So this is the deal with stability as far as the first order modulator is concerned. Okay. Now, can we think about what happens in the second order modulator? Okay. So again, if you look at the second order modulator, all right. Now, what happens is, it is known that, your you know uh, linearly it kind of, the linearly, I mean, the linearized analysis tells us that it is always stable. Okay. The linearized analysis tells us that it is always stable, right? But when you talk about things like this, okay, So there have been some, there are certain some derivations that have been there, but what people have found out is as u goes closer, right? It doesn't become totally unstable, right? But it kind of probably takes a little more time to settle. All right. So there are some analysis that has been done. We will not go through all of them. So the linearized analysis tells us that the second order modulator is also going to be always stable. But what happens is, as we know, the error at the input of the quantizer is going to be more, right? It's going to be much more than what it was earlier, right? And therefore, as modulus of u approaches 1, right, the input of the quantizer, input to the quantizer, increases drastically, okay? Because the errors are larger, and this loop itself has got a larger uh, gain for the noise, right? The overall noise kind of blows up, right? And this the input to the quantizer starts increasing a lot, okay? So we cannot say that it becomes kind of unstable, but then what we can say is that the the error or the input to the quantizer becomes fairly large, and sometimes it can, of course, because of the circuit limitations where things go and sit at VDD and so on, it doesn't go into complete instability, right? But it can be called as being less stable than mod 1, okay? All right. So because what happens is the oscillations per se will not happen for very large amplitudes, because the circuit itself will start limiting, right? And but what happens is, like, we can but it is kind of a little less stable. Maybe it has a little more time to settle, to ring, and so on, okay? But so which is why people try to limit the input to a little fraction of the full scale input, okay? So for example, if it is 1 volt, you kind of limit it to some 0.9 or something like that. But then we know that, like, at the linearized analysis, it doesn't become unstable, okay? So that is the deal with the second order nonlinear, okay, second order modulator, sorry, okay? Now let us look at higher order modulators. Okay. Now I want you to kind of understand this. So first, what we will do is we'll try to intuitively think about it, okay? Next, what we will do is we will try to write some expressions and mathematically prove that even in the linearized analysis, it's kind of going to become a problem, okay? So that is what we are going to do now. All right. So let's think about it as in a higher order modulator, right? Let's say this is your quantizer, okay? Being consistent with last class notation, we said that the input to the quantizer is y, and the output of the quantizer is v. Let's say e is being added here, right? So the transfer function, of course, you have your, let's just bunch the whole thing together and say some h of z is here. This is u, right? And this is y, correct? Now, what did we so if you what did we see in last class? At y, the transfer function between y and e, right? The noise, it becomes basically what, or rather the expression at y, we can say that it is going to be u of z plus ntf of z minus 1 into e of z, right? So y of z can be written like this. This is what we saw in last class, right? And what we saw in last class was that this particular term, right, the variance of this particular term increases as the order of h of z increases. Correct, that's what we saw. Now, what does it mean to say that the variance of noise or the variance of the signal uh, increases at the input of the quantum? What are we, when you physically translate it to, let's say, voltages and currents, what does it mean? When you say the variance of, a signal or a noise is quite high, what do we actually mean in this case? Let's say physically in terms of voltages.
So it vary more.
The amplitude of
There is
variations
some
is
other
more,
book.
correct? So let's
Oh,
say it is a
yeah.
zero mean sequence, like that's what we thought, at the beginning of the discussion of delta sigma modulators, we said that it is a zero mean white sequence. So basically what happens is the amplitude is quite large here, right? The amplitude of the signal, the signal plus the noise here is quite large, okay? Now we can decompose this signal into two parts, right? The signal at y can be written as, let's say, okay, let me give the condition. Let's say u is a DC signal, all right? U is a DC signal. Now, at point y, what can we say? The signal at y can be decomposed into DC plus noise, correct? In other words, it's going to be the input u of z or u of n plus the shape noise. And now at this point, there is no FIR low pass filter, which is chucking out all the out of band noise, and therefore the variance of this particular noise is very, very large. That is to say, let's say you have, um, let me just draw a small sinusoidal signal. Okay. Now what you are seeing here is the actual signal which is sitting at y, right? We can simulate this and you can show, right? Like so, it will be like this. Okay. Now the scribbles that I drew are actually basically, if you kind of zoom it in, it's basically some toggling square waveforms, right? Because it's a quantizer, right? So if you, I will try to do that and also show it to you. And you can do this in MATLAB and you can see this effect. Okay. So basically, what happens is it toggles between two adjacent quantization levels, right? And what is the whole deal with delta sigma? The whole deal with delta sigma is that, like, as you run a moving average, right, which is basically what is happening, right? If you run a moving average, then the based on the duty cycle of the signal, right, the duty cycle of this toggling signals, right, you get the required analog value. Okay. Basically, it is a pulse width modulated signal. Okay. So in case, I guess you would have seen, or maybe I'll also try to show maybe in one of the subsequent classes, right? If you have a 1-bit quantizer, the output would be either 0 or 1, right? And what you would basically see there is it's a pulse width modulated signal, right? You have oversampled it so much, right? And of course, when you pass it through a low pass filter and other things, you basically get back your original signal. Okay. So if you look at the actual time domain waveform of a delta sigma modulator, in this case it's a multi-level, multi-bit delta sigma modulator, right? So you basically will have, so this kind of a toggling signals. Okay. Now the error, the error would be like this, and of course, after at V it will become like this, at Y it will be like this. Okay. Now it can also, the error signal can even go higher than 1 bit and things like that. Error more than one level and so on, right? Now, but this is how it is going to be. All right. So you can decompose the signal and say, okay, there is a DC part. Okay, here I drew a sinusoidal signal to see how things are. right? But for a DC, if you give a DC signal, right, you're basically going to have, you know, a lot of noise around it. All right. So this is how Y will look like, and V will basically look like, you know what, the quantized versions of this noise. Okay. Now, what is happening is, what we are interested in here is basically this, right? Uh, just think of it normally. If your input is, let's say, in this region, what will happen? It has some signal and some noise. I mean, the feedback loop will basically shape the noise in a certain way, and so of course you will have more noise, no more high frequency noise, and so on, right? Compare this signal with a signal, let's say, which is somewhere here. Now, do you think there will be any difference in the way in these two signals behave? Let's say this is signal 1, which is in the middle of the quantizer region, and there is one more signal which is kind of close to the edge of the quantizer. Let's say, I mean, sorry, these two signals are the inputs. Okay, maybe let's say take a DC input for all that matters. Let's say a DC input which is sitting here, and a DC input which is sitting, you know, very close to this saturating point of your quantizer. Do you think there will be some kind of a problem? Or what do you think will happen? Will there be a difference between the way in which signal 1 and signal 2, if fed at the input, okay, signal 1 and signal 2, if fed at the input, do you think there will be some way, a difference in the way in which the loop will behave? Yes, no? Just think intuitively. See, at this point, let's say it is a DC voltage, right? At this point, how will it be? It will be one noisy signal. Do you think there will be a difference in the way in which, let's say, the amplitude of the noise is a little larger? Do you think there is a difference in the way in which these things behave?
So for first one, the quantization will happen for all the ranges of the voltage, and for the second one,
Yeah, sorry, I'm not able to hear you now. I could, yeah, for the first one, you are saying that,
the second
yeah,
one, it becomes at one or something like that. If the noise become more,
Yes,
noise
sir.
is
The
more
second
than
signal
if it's saturated one.
correct, right? So what you, yeah, I understood what you're saying. So basically here the noise and the signal both will be properly quantized, right? So in other words, there is more like a linear relationship which happens, right? But whereas as the noise goes, I mean, as the signal goes up close to the saturation of your quantizer, what happens? The noise will get kind of chopped off like this, correct? There is a chopping that happens here because of the saturation of your quantizer. Okay. So in other words, so basically what is going to happen is that the feedback signal is not a proper representation of what is going into the quantizer. In other words, right? I mean, V is just supposed to be a quantized version of Y, right? But that relationship breaks apart when your input goes closer to the saturation of your quantizer. Okay, that is to say, there is an extra error which is added here at E, which is not getting reflected back in the feedback signal. Understood? Right? So when there is a lot of error here, I mean when the error reaches somewhere like this, you're not feeding back this much of error. You're only feeding back this much of error. You understood? So whether it is here, or even let's say the error goes even higher, what you are feeding back is one constant level of error. Okay, things are, it is like this. Due to election time here, even if corona cases are rising a lot, you will only tell the media that corona cases are very less, so that politicians can continue their rallies, right? So you kind of chop off the numbers, make them look nice. Okay, I think pretty much every state is doing something similar, right? So you do not, I mean, the output is not I mean, there is so much error, but that entire error is not coming to the feedback signal, correct? So that is the, so basically what can we say? So there is some incorrect feedback happening, and obviously the loop will start, either over correcting or under correcting, and it will start to struggle, and basically it goes into instability. Okay, this is the intuitive understanding behind instability for larger input signals, and this problem is more because we know that at higher order delta sigma modulators, the variance of the noise at the input of the quantizer is large. It literally exponentially grows up as you increase the order, correct? Like how we saw in last class. So which means that this noise that is riding on top of your signal, the amplitude of that noise is going to become larger and larger as you increase the order of your delta sigma modulator, and it will quickly what, let's say for a third order delta sigma modulator, if you're here, it goes into, let's say, instability. For your second order, for your fourth order delta sigma modulator, maybe if your amplitude is somewhere here itself, the noise will start, the noise variance is so high that the signal, I mean, that the loop goes into instability. Okay, so this is more like an intuitive understanding to say that you're kind of throwing off the loop, right? The loop is kind of broken, and in order, the loop will try its level best to kind of fix its issues on its own, but it is desperately failing basically, and so you will get some totally junk values. All right. Okay, so let us look at it more mathematically. Now, to understand it mathematically, let's say that the input y, or rather the at the input of the quantizer, let's write it as k1 times the input u, and k2 times the NTF minus 1 times the noise. Okay. So this is K1 and K2 are basically, you can take them to be fitting parameters. All right. Now, so basically the actual mathematical formulation will be looking like something like this. Okay. So y is basically going to be K1 times u plus K2 times K2 times the noise is y, and at V what do you do? It is basically K1 times u plus K2 times n plus E. Okay. Now K1 and K2 are kind of estimated mathematically by using some algorithm like least squares optimization, least square solutions, and so on. So and you find out the coefficients K1 and K2. Okay. Now in case 1, where the input u is in the middle of, let's say, middle or region of the quantizer, what do you think, how will K1 and K2 be related? Look at this and you tell me. So what I'm saying is, this black curve is u, and this is the noise, right? And we say that y is k1 times u plus k2 times n. That's because of the loop, and the v is basically given as this plus some additional noise e, right? Now, how is k1 and k2 related when, let's say, the input is around the middle of your quantizer range? Will they be equal? Will they be different? What do you guess? It will be
So I
pretty
think
much equal because noise and this are pretty close to each other. So K1, I mean, they are in the lean kind of the quantizer is not running into saturation, and therefore K1 will be approximately equal to K2. Okay, so the way we can kind of describe this is like to say, okay, this is your loop, this is your U, let's say this is your H of Z, right, and then this is K1 times this thing. Okay, this is your DC path, and for your noise, how it is? H of Z, you have K2, you have E being added. This is your noise. All right. So basically, this noise N is because of the E, the previous samples of E, right? So this is the signal loop and this is the noise loop, right? And when the input is in the middle range of the quantizer, K1 and K2 are pretty much the same, all right? Now, what happens as you move, let me write case 2, as V in, or let's say U increases and reaches closer to the saturation limit of the quantizer. What can you say about K1 and K2 now? Anyway, K1 will be as usual because that is the signal path loop, right? And what happens to K2?
yes, sir.
Do you
K2
think
will be
K2 will
more.
be more?
K2 will increase.
Think carefully, enter. Look at this particular diagram. Maybe let me just, let's say this is the, let's say, final step of the quantizer. And let's say this is your input. Oops. Let's say this is how my noise is. How will my noise at the output look? Right? Right? Something like this, right? Wherever it is going high, greater than this, it's going to be like, you know,
Yes,
okay?
sir. K2 is
So
less.
basically, what is this? This is my Y, and this is my V. So what can we say? Because the quantizer is literally chopping it off, right? This is hard saturation, right? So what we can say is that K2 reduces, right? K2 reduces as U increases, correct? Especially and becomes closer to saturation, right? Okay, all right. So now, what is the implication? Okay. So let us say, let me redraw this noise loop. This is 0 plus minus. Let's say this is my, okay, be consistent, let's say h of z, right? And then let's say this is K2. Okay. Again, understand that K2 is kind of the fitting parameter here, but then it captures the effect, right? Let's say this is V out, correct? And this is my loop. Okay, so let us calculate what is V out. V out can be written as what? V out becomes minus of V out of Z, right? Let's say what is V out here? V out of Z is nothing but minus 0 minus V out of Z multiplied by H of Z multiplied by K2 plus E of Z. Right. So this can be written as V out of Z is equal to 1 plus H of Z into K2, sorry, is equal to E of Z. So V out of Z divided by E of Z, right? This is the actual noise transfer function. Let me call it as NT. Okay, let's just retain it as V out of Z by E of Z. Okay. This can be written as what? 1 divided by 1 plus H of Z into K2. Correct. All right. Now let's retain this in this equation. All right. Let me just say number 1. What is our? How is our noise transfer function related to this H of Z? Right. So let's say, for example, let's say the order is 3. What is my NTF? 1 minus Z inverse the whole cube. Okay. Now, how can I write my let's say in the absence of this K2, right? My original loop, correct? So let's say this is my before I modeled it, right? Let's say, right? So how will I write this thing, right? V is nothing but U minus V times H of Z plus E of Z, right? So V becomes 1 plus H of Z equal to U plus E of Z, and therefore V of Z can be written as U of Z divided by 1 plus H of Z plus E of Z divided by 1 plus H of Z. Correct? Like before we brought in all these fitting parameters and other things. Let's say if you had a constant K, it just kind of goes into this whole thing, right? So NTF can be written as what? NTF can be written as 1 plus H of Z, right? This is basically my NTF, right? Or rather 1 by this quantity, right? So this is nothing but 1 minus Z inverse the whole cube. Okay, so what is H of Z here? H of Z can be written as 1 minus Z inverse the whole cube minus 1. So this is the H of Z that is being used here. Okay, so let us plug it in. Okay, plugging in 2 into 1, what will you get? So V out by E can be written as 1 by 1 plus H of Z K2 times K2 times H of Z, right? And basically you will have 1 by 1 plus K2 times 1 by 1 minus Z inverse the whole cube minus 1. Okay, so now this basically you can substitute this expression and so on, and you can you will basically get what you this is nothing but a root locus plot. I mean, you can plot the root locus, right? So I hope all of you are familiar with root locus plots in control systems and so on. What is root locus plot? What do you do in a root locus plot?
So we plot the roots of the characteristic
Correct.
equation.
Right. So you basically you can write this as some numerator of Z divided by some denominator of Z. Okay. And what will you vary when you are doing a root locus plot? Gain. In this case, what is the gain?
K2.
K2. Okay. So basically, you do a you plot the root locus, and what you see is, that is, how do you plot the root locus? Vary K2 and find the poles, correct? This is what you basically do in root locus, right? You have a transfer function here, V out by E. The only difference between the ideal version and this version is we have brought into picture this factor K2, right? And this factor K2 is basically, going to determine what is, how your how your poles are going to move. Okay, so for the ideal case, okay, when K2 is equal to 1, right, basically it's the normal case. You know that your noise transfer function is nothing but 1 by 1 minus z inverse the whole cube, right? So which basically means z minus 1 by z the whole cube, right? So basically it means what? You have 3 poles at z equal to 0. That is, when K2 is equal to 1, right? Here I said K1 equal to K2 is almost equal to unity. Okay. So when your quantizer, when your signal is in the middle of the quantization range, the quantizer's range, what you have is that, and when your noise is not too high, right? You have the poles, 3 poles sitting here. Correct. Now, as K2 starts dropping, which is what we saw, right? As your, as the signal moves closer to the quantizer saturation regime, right? K2 starts falling down, and so we are going to evaluate and see what happens as K2 falls. Okay, so it turns out that for a second order system, the third order delta sigma modulator, there are 3 poles, right? So one pole moves like this, and the other 2 are complex conjugate. Basically they move like this and go like this. Okay. Now what happens is, at a certain value of K2, what happens? The system becomes unstable. Okay. For a certain value of K2, as K2 decreases, this is the direction in which the poles of the system are going to move, and the moment it reaches the unit circle, it's going to become unstable. Okay. So the conclusion is that as long as the poles are less, the magnitude of the poles are less than unity. Okay. In other words, let me just say, magnitude of the pole is less than unity, right? The system DSM is stable, which implies that as long as K2 is greater than some, let's put some constant. What shall we say? Some K2 is less than some constant C, right? As long as K2 is greater than C, we can say that the DSM is stable, right? Now we need to figure out what is the value of the input which pushes this K2 to this value, right? Because at K2 equal to C, let's say the poles reach this point. So in other words, what we are saying is, there exists a certain, as long as V in is less than what is called as a maximum stable amplitude. Okay, it's called as maximum stable amplitude, MSA. Okay, so as long as V in is less than MSA, your DSM is stable. Okay, that is to say, let's say you have this quantizer. Okay, the MSA can be kind of restricted to something like this. Okay, this can, or rather, this is, if you, let's say this is plus plus Vsat, and let's say this is minus Vsat, you can say that this is your maximum stable amplitude. If it is a unipolar thing, obviously you know that, if it is 0 to this one, this is your maximum stable amplitude. All right. So in other words, what we are saying is, for higher order loops, there exists a quantity called as maximum stable amplitude, in short form called as MSA, right? Beyond which the delta sigma loop is going to become unstable. Why is it going to be unstable? Because it's a higher order delta sigma loop, and so the variance of the noise which is circulating inside the loop is quite high, right? And because of this high variance of noise, it is going to saturate the quantizer, and this saturation of the quantizer is going to lead to unstable operation. Okay. So is it clear? Any doubts? Are you able to understand? So first we looked at it at a more intuitive level. We said that the quantizer, the feedback loop is kind of broken. It's not doing its job as it is supposed to, and so definitely some impairment in the performance is expected. That's what we saw. And then we went into mathematics, and then we said, okay, for the we'll decompose the signal into signal as well as the noise, and we said that we can decompose the signal transfer function as k1, and the noise has a gain of k2. As long as they are in the linear region, right, they're kind of I mean they're kind of in the proper, I mean, k1 is almost equal to k2, right? And then what happens is, as k, yeah, it will be kind of little around 1 and so on, right? But as it starts clipping, because the noise is very large, right, k2 starts dropping, and we see here that as you put a k2 in the noise path, right, and you modify the noise transfer function appropriately, you see that the system is becoming unstable. Okay. So this is the reason behind instability of higher order delta sigma modulators, or in other words, we can also say that the higher order delta sigma, all higher order delta sigma modulators have what is called as a MSA, maximum stable amplitude, beyond which the system will go into instability. Okay. So with this, we'll conclude today's class. Any doubts or questions? Okay.
No, sir.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Okay, Bhuvan has asked, is MSA determined practically using? Yeah. Okay, so it is not determined using Monte Carlo. Even without going to Monte Carlo, you can determine it. So I will talk about it in the next class, how to do that. Okay. So basically, in transient simulation itself, you will find out. Okay, no need to even go to Monte Carlo.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you, sir.